to the Scott and Loz show.
All right.
I'm all right, pal. Are you all right?
I'm all right, buddy.
I'm not your buddy. Right. Episode 18, I believe, Loz.
Who thought we'd make it this far?
18.
I did.
I know, 18. Well, the show is old enough to watch Pulp Fiction now, or order a pint of, well, anything alcoholic.
Yeah. In England, yes.
Yes, and well, cheers to that.
Indeed. Clinky, clinky.
Those who've been listening so far will have heard, well, two. We've not really split it as series, but I guess we've kind of treated it as such subconsciously or unwrittenly.
Internally.
Internally, yeah, it's a better one. So yeah, we did a series on films and we did a series on music. And whilst I think it's fair to say Loz and I bloody loved doing all of it, because they both followed the same, almost slightly regimented format, which they needed to be, otherwise they would have been twice as long.
Yes.
I think we both thought, in the absence of, a swathe of feedback from listeners, we thought, well, sod it, let's do what we want for the third series, if you like, the second reincarnation of the Scott and Loz show. And well, each episode is going to be slightly different, isn't it? Now, let's not tease. We can tease them out, but let's not reveal what all of them are going to be. Everyone is going to know what this one is, presumably, because they'll have clicked on an episode that says the Scott and Loz show.
Wrestling.
Chip, chip, chow.
Oh, it's me. It's the L-O to the Z, rolling once again with the S-C-O double T. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all ages, the Scott and Loz show proudly brings to you the heavyweight podcast champions of the world, the Beast, Loz Beach, and Bad News, Scotty Hughes. Two dicks talking bollocks. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is just a small reason of why I love wrestling. It's exuberant. It's over the top. There are scenes that I didn't even think I could see that I have seen. Characters
it's brash bosh, isn't it? Really,
it is. Again, it has crossed my mind that perhaps as a child who was sort of a little bit troubled at school, shall we say, in terms of confidence, certainly. And I think perhaps seeing these guys doing their thing and sticking the middle finger up to authority and that sort of thing, I do wonder whether that sort of appealed to me. But one thing that I have very sort of striking memories of is actually watching the wrestling with my nan. I remember being around at my nan's house, and I understand from mum that her mum had watched the wrestling, the likes of Giant Haystacks and Big Daddy back in the World of Sport days. And so I found on Channel 4 that they were presenting WWE, WWF at the time, Heat. I think it was Sunday Night Heat, if I do believe.
Okay.
And,
sorry, Loz, how old were you roughly?
I did try and work it out actually, but it was rather inconclusive because.
Okay, I'm just trying to age myself at the same time, as to when this.
I would have said perhaps sort of 10 or 11, but I am terrible with age, it must be said.
No, that's cool.
I was still fairly young.
That kind of middle school age, sort of, yeah.
And I remember sort of being interested, sort of thing, but at the same time, this one wrestler came out, and he had an actual sort of dragon's head, and there was sort of fire.
Dragon's head.
Well, okay, yeah. He was. I'm talking about Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, right? And Ricky came out with. I don't know what it was made of, but he had a dragon's head which he took off.
So, but Steamboat.
Yeah.
I
Ricky
mean,
Steamboat, yeah.
I like it.
He's a legendary wrestler.
Oh, that is. I just, for some reason, I felt like he. I mean, obviously, let's face it. The Dragon probably was a pseudonym rather than his actual middle name. But
Yes, yeah.
I assumed that Steamboat might have been some sort of stage surname as well, which was why I chuckled, because I thought, why would you bring in both? No, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
But no. I should know better than anyone else. Americans have ridiculous surnames at times. So Steamboat, Steamboat.
Well, I don't actually know whether it's his family name or not. It's all I've never ever known him as. But
I've never heard of this guy. Anyway, I'm sorry, Loz. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, please.
yeah, Ricky the Dragon. So out he comes, flames going off in the background, almost sort of oriental inflection on the music, I think. And I remember my nan, bless her heart, being like, "See, I mean, I was still fairly young, obviously. She was like, 'See, he's not a real dragon. The head comes off.'" Nice one, Nan. Yeah, well done. Yeah. So basically, Ricky was a really great worker, and one of his almost like signature moves was the deep arm drag. It's a move where it basically grabbed your arm to flip you over onto your back and slam you onto the mat. And in one motion, he made it look sort of elegant, and at the same time, you felt like that would hurt as well. And I was always immediately sort of like, the elegance and also somehow the power as well. I was just like, oh, that's because he's quite a slight chap for, some of the guys in wrestling naturally are quite big, and Ricky was more a nimble fella, shall we say? And that's honestly genuinely my
Dragon and Steamboat.
yeah.
I mean, are we going to get to discuss kind of finishing moves? Is there, I don't know, is there a section where we're going to kind of talk about finishing moves, or are they just going to come up here and there when we talk about different wrestlers?
Well, basically, what I'm going for is I'm going to do an overview of sort of how I think about wrestling. But yeah, please do. If there's something that you remember, something jumps out at you, then you jump straight up and holler on it, because I realized I haven't done like a rankings of like my favorite superstars or that sort of thing.
Oh, well, basically, I'll ask you at some point if it doesn't naturally come up in conversation, because I'd love to know. But I apologize, listeners. Me and Loz could have convened beforehand and kind of, but we could have done. But I'm glad we didn't, because I didn't want to know what was coming today with this episode, and so if we had convened and Loz had like laid out an itinerary of the direction of the episode, I don't know. I didn't want to hear it. I want to hear it now. So.
So that's genuinely my earliest sort of memory of wrestling, and as I say, that everything from the entrance to the costumes to the flips and the slams in the ring, the bold and brash sort of personalities, and even to a degree, the commentary helped sort of helped everything sort of flow along, and the roar of the crowd. And I was sort of, as someone who's always been fairly performative in one way or another, it sort of took a hold of me. And it wasn't long before the exploits of Mr. Stone Cold Steve Austin became apparent to me.
Well, yeah,
and
this is this is where I really got into wrestling as well. I didn't want to sort of jump in and indeed jump ahead at the same time. But I mean, my kind of first memory of wrestling really is the first or second year of high school, maybe, when things like SmackDown, WWF as it was at the time. And I totally agree with what Loz just said. It was the hyperbole of it, that how pumped everything was. The commentators just going fucking mental, and and like how every wrestler was so defined as a character, with the stage presence, the outfit, the music. It just, you couldn't help but massively identify with like several of them. I had a dream the other night in which, oh dear, well, I'm not going to go fully into this, not because it's anything embarrassing about it, but just because it's irrelevant. But basically, like I like to sort of note down my dreams, because I just think it's hilarious to do. So it's being bothered to do it. That's the problem. Because in the middle of the night and you get your phone out, and it kills your eyes, of course, to look at the screen and try and type something out on the notes. But if you do it, it's amazing. You remember these dreams months on, and yeah, one came up the other night where there was like an IT sort of issue at a school. and the Undertaker came to fix it. So like, it was that you know the tolling of the bell was.
Yeah.
And oh, you know exactly what I mean. As you can hear the music right now, you can see, and yeah, yeah, the Undertaker came out, and yeah, it was something to do with a key card door system was being defective or something, and he came and fixed it. Yeah.
But was he in full costume as well?
Oh, you betcha. No, this was the Undertaker, like in his prime. But then, of course, the irony is that he came out and said, "Well, yeah, this is going to be a network issue." And then, yeah, and then he just fixed it, and off he went back into the depths of hell, you know. So yeah, sorry, that was a little detour there, but just really it came up because I was talking about how much of a big deal each entrance was for a wrestler, you know. And Loz mentioned Stone Cold, and I'll chuck it back to you, old bean, because I want to hear you talk about some of these wrestlers from this era.
Oh, sure. And I mean, you know, Austin, they had that genius idea of having the sound of glass breaking just before the proper sort of music hit.
Yeah.
And for a while there, I think certainly perhaps for the big occasions, they actually got a pane of glass with Austin 316 on it that would smash, and then Austin would walk through to the, you know, wow.
Yeah.
You
knew
from,
or something, wasn't it?
Could well be.
You
knew that it was about to kick off then.
Oh God, yeah. Because I always think of Stone Cold as just like callous disregard. Could not. I mean, all the wrestlers are supposed to be like that, but Stone Cold in particular was just like, you know, I do not give a shit what you stand for. He really embodied that. And then,
oh yeah,
things like cracking open a can of beer on his face, you know, and stuff like that, I guess just tied into that whole persona, didn't it? And
well, actually, that was more the signature of another wrestler called the Sandman, who was more sort of prominent in ECW. And he as part of his entrance, he would regularly open a beer on his skull, and it would normally be bleeding by the time he hit the ring. So that tells you the sort of. But no, Steve Austin, he would regularly have a beer bash at the end of his matches. And he'd sort of stand there in the ring and have guys like chuck up beers to him as he was celebrating on the ropes. Do apologize to be that guy, but
no, but do be a pedant, because I'm the one who's kind of been ignorant and getting things wrong. You know, I'd expect to be corrected. Yeah, now you mention it, I do remember him like having beers tossed to him, and just there's nothing worse than like drinking the head of a beer. You know, like when you crack it open and it's just there's not the taste of lager is not going to be there. It's just going to be this horrible flat pissy, you know. Just the thought of that almost triggers my gag reflex. But an
American beer as well, not exactly the best example. But I think also if you looked at it, I mean, you know, there was no doubt he drank his fair share of beer, but I think most of it ended up down his front than actually in his mouth. So
I know, and also it wouldn't look quite as hardcore if someone was like, you know, cracks it. Oh God, no, sorry. Can you just pass me a chilled bottle of, you know, whatever it might be, please? Yeah. Not shaken or stirred.
Has somebody got any Pilsner, please?
Yeah.
Just sitting quietly, like as you said in previous podcasts, in a nice chair and a glass of wine, and he's just sort of recollecting his moment of victory.
Well, like we were talking about the Undertaker, and of course it was supposedly his brother Kane, wasn't it? And I remember back when I watched it, Kane storming into Vince McMahon. So, oh no, it wasn't Vince McMahon; it was William Regal.
William Regal, yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, hello, Kane. Care for a spot of tea?" You know, and it was just it was hilarious. So each character so wonderfully individually kind of recognized, and quite possibly my favorite was Stone Cold. I mean, I remember when I was really, really into it, and SmackDown was kind of maybe the frequent, you know, it was that era, Lars. Stone Cold and The Rock were the two that were like really battling it out for the throne on a regular basis. And so I think I was more a Stone Cold man than a Rock man at the time. But I love them both.
Oh yeah, I think you had to kind of admire the one even if you had a preference for the other.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But I think what they had, you know, what really propelled Stone Cold to sort of the height of his popularity was oddly Vince McMahon, the owner of the WWF, and he'd had a situation previously which has been spoken about to death so I won't necessarily dig deep into the minutiae. But he'd had a superstar who he'd unfortunately got himself locked into a 10-year contract, and they were
Right.
not small wages. But the pedigree of the guy, we're talking about Bret the Hitman Hart. And he had essentially realized that if he kept him on this contract, that he couldn't meet the contract demands that he said to some of his other guys. And he sort of went to him and, no offense, but and I'm paraphrasing, this is not this is not a quote from Vince, but he basically said to him, look, I'm really sorry, but I need guys like the Undertaker far more than I need guys like you, because Bret was very much, I mean, one of his nicknames was the excellence of execution. I mean, he was one of the best pure wrestlers I think there's ever been in the industry. But he wasn't a big personality. You know, he wasn't, I wouldn't say he was bland, but he wasn't going to talk you into the building, but he'd make sure you were glad you were there when you were there, sort of thing. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, his time on top as champion just didn't draw money like, I mean, the likes of Austin was, you know, absolutely eclipsed. And so he found himself with a situation where Bret and Shawn Michaels had been at each other's throats. Shawn was sort of a really cocky, brash character, coming out to "Sexy Boy," the most ridiculous theme music. Again, if you're curious, check it out because it's something to behold. And Shawn, he was the antithesis of Bret, and he was, you know, doing drugs and late nights and getting into bar brawls. And he turned up once to TV with a black eye and sort of a bruised cheek because he'd managed to accidentally pick a fight with a group of Marines.
Right.
And everyone was just like, you know, literally the biggest elephant in the room there ever was, where he's clearly got a big shiner on him, and like none of the commentators are referencing it. It's just like, okay, that wasn't supposed to happen.
Yeah.
So basically, because of Bret's hatred of Shawn, he refused to lose the title to him, despite the fact that Shawn was sort of the next in line. Bret was going to make a move to WCW, which was the other big company at the time, and it was sort of, you know, his contract was coming up in the next couple of weeks, and he was going to need to pass the belt before moving across, because WCW and WWE were the two companies that feuded in the much sort of spoken about Monday Night Wars. And they were trying to put the WWE out of business, and the other likewise. So Vince was not going to give them the opportunity for Bret to walk out onto their show still being his champion. You know, that would be the ultimate sort of indignity.
Yeah.
And through one thing and another, Bret actually was having to defend the title in Canada, and he was Canadian. And he said, there's one thing I'm definitely not doing is losing to that son of a bitch in Canada. And Vince was like, right, okay, it's the last pay-per-view of his contract. And Bret had apparently pledged to lose the title at a house show, which is a non-televised event for the people in attendance. And Vince essentially had made the decision. He wanted whatever happened with the title to be caught on camera, and he didn't feel that he could trust that Bret would actually, you know, pass the belt over when the time came. So he concocted what is referred to as the Montreal screw job, which basically means that at the end of the match, Vince had come down to ringside, and it was all, you know, quite normal for that sort of thing to happen. There was often sort of people interfering in particularly in high profile matches. Vince was down at the ringside, and Shawn had put Bret Hart into a sharpshooter, just a submission hold.
Right.
And Vince immediately told the timekeeper to ring the bell, and Shawn sort of had the title thrust at him and looked thoroughly ashamed, and just sort of like hightailed it up off the ramp. And normally, you know, this brash, cocky superstar would have, you know, lauded it in his rival's face that he just defeated him for the title, and he couldn't have disappeared quicker. And I think he understood at the time, for such an indiscretion on such a well-respected sort of technician like Bret Hart to have been screwed out of the title like that. I mean, some of these angles, people were getting screwed out of the title left, right, and center, but that was storyline, and this was a shoot, as they would say. This is legit. This actually, Bret had no idea what was going on, and the crowd, immediately sort of, chorus of boos, and Bret, looks Vince in the eye over the ropes and spits dead in his eye, and then turns to the camera and writes in the air WCW, which was, going to be his new employers, and sort of left. And there were several wrestlers the morning after, which basically several walked out. Mick Foley or Mankind, he quit on the spot and was basically only came back to work having spoken to Bret, and Bret had said, whatever Vince has done, this is not your fight to fight. It's going to cost you a career here, when really it's between me and him. And that I appreciate the support, but it's just going to hit you and your family in the pocket. Please don't do it. So he came back to work. But I mean, there are several people that quit out of principle, and it's said that the Undertaker forced Vince into a locker room confrontation with Bret, where Bret landed a stellar right hook on Vince and absolutely floored him. And it was from then on that Vince decided, hey, I could try and make people see my point of view and say, this is my company, I've got to protect my interests. This is not just the people in the ring, but it's the ring crew, it's the people in the office. Everybody, in the whole corporation is relying on this show being the best it can be. And he sort of felt that, I couldn't bear for this title to walk into another promotion. So I did what I had to do. And instead of sort of trying to smooth things over, he came out with the infamous Bret screwed Bret promo, where Vince said exactly that Bret had screwed himself, that he hadn't done anything. It was all Bret Hart, and through all of his bravado and all of his sort of, I'm not going to lose to him and all the rest of it, that if he'd have just done some goddamn business, then it would have been fine. But no, he wouldn't lose in Canada. And it created the ultimate villain. And the beauty about
sorry, go on.
The beauty about a villain is every good villain needs slaying by somebody. And here was Stone Cold Steve Austin, this beer swilling redneck who hated authority. And they soon realized, as soon as they put the two together, as you say, Austin was referred to as the rattlesnake, and he would strike at friend or foe alike, and the Stone Cold Stunner could be performed in a flash, and the guy would be out. I mean, there's a ridiculous video on YouTube if you want to search it out, where Stone Cold actually pretty much lays out the majority of the entire roster with Stone Cold Stunners.
Seen this.
It's ridiculous.
Well, the Stone Cold Stunner was always my favourite finisher move. We talked about finisher moves earlier, or at least hinted at it. So I suppose here's what I can kind of say. The Stone Cold Stunner was by far my favourite, and always was, because it was started off with a kick to the bollocks. Now, that is fairly incapacitating, is that the right word? Or debilitating. And then that kind of, or is it a kick to the chest? I don't know.
I would say officially they would have probably said kick to the chest, but more often than not, I think the plums got involved as well.
But it was kind of that low abdominal kick, let's say.
Yes, it was deep down there.
And then there's the spin and the slam. It was amazing. Whereas, if I'm being honest with you, the rock bottom, like, it was just a slam. And this is where I don't want to be disrespectful in any way, but this is why I kind of really very quickly went off wrestling as quickly as I got into it. Because when I started thinking, well, what on earth is the difference between a suplex and the rock bottom? You're just being sort of slammed on your back. But, the writhing and the twitching and the cart, the somersaulting, upon having been the recipient of a rock bottom. And like for a while, I was kind of like, I bought into the whole thing But I guess that's kind of, again, without wishing to be in any way insulting, because I'm not. You're talking about Vince McMahon and the preservation of like his baby in terms of entertainment and things, and I think that's what it was for me. It's entertainment at all costs, above the rest. It's, in fact, really, I mean, I'm sure you would agree nowadays, if not even back then, that it very much swung on the side, more on the side of soap opera than it did
Oh yes,
wrestling. And
well, I think that's interesting that you should pick that up, because it's very telling that the WWF went from the World Wrestling Federation. I mean, admittedly, they lost a court case with the World Wildlife Foundation.
That's right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah,
and
but yes,
even though you couldn't mistake the two, there wasn't, you weren't ever likely to see Stone Cold walk out there and drop a panda with a stunner. You know, it's just not, the two aren't going to mix.
Exactly, or people doing a swimming gala and then accidentally donating the proceeds to Vince McMahon instead.
Yeah. So they changed the name to World Wrestling Entertainment, and yeah, I think that's a very astute observation. It was the in ring was certainly important, but it was about the characters and, as you say, the interactions and the showboating, and I mean, my God, the endless feud with Vince particularly and Stone Cold, where, I mean, again, I don't want to spoil anything that may or may not be coming on later on, but I think one of the big times that I certainly remember was Stone Cold's beer bash, where he rammed the actual ring with a truck that was used to, deliver beer on an industrial scale. Right. And he like sprayed down the people in the ring with this like beer cannon, and like, fair play. It probably would be a little bit sort of, if you're being sprayed with anything, it would be difficult. But God bless them, they really went for it. There's people in the ring trying to like swim their way across the ring, and there were people like flipping and back flipping over in like in the suds of this beer, and it did look like it was going at quite a force. And for somebody like Vince as well, he's got such great disgusted sort of visuals, that sort of, oh, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Yes, that's one of the things that I hear a lot of people go, oh my God, when he hits the ring with and sprays them all with the beer. There's so many great Stone Cold memories. But
you can see what I mean with the whole finishing move thing, can't you? I mean, like, for example, with The Rock, the people's elbow was great because there was such theatrics to it and the whole crowd got put. But then I suppose there was some part of me that thought, well, that could hurt, because he sort of dropped himself with his elbow on someone, and I guess part of me back then thought, well, that could genuinely be like an elbow to the ribs, that could hurt or whatever. And with the Stone Cold Stunner, likewise, that could break a neck, if it went wrong. Whereas with the Rock Bottom, it was just literally him picking someone up and then almost placing him on his back. And I remember thinking at the time, well, I've seen like 3 slams in this fight that have been like more extreme than that in terms of like putting someone on the canvas on their back. And the whole idea of a finishing move and it being like tenfold more effective than anything else we've seen in the match so far. Some of them definitely, and I bought into it, but then others I kind of started to think, come on. And
And
I'm sure you were the same.
Oh, sorry, go on.
I'm sure you were the same, yeah.
Well, I was going to say something that came up through my listening of What Culture podcasts is, again, going back to the people's elbow. I just accepted it all verbatim, that he was the most electrifying man, and this was the most electrifying move in all of sports entertainment, as they so often said. And, the jigging about and the, slapping and back and forth and all the rest of it, I was like, somehow that's created extra momentum that, especially as a younger man, I was like, look at the bloke. He's like flopping about like he's been electrocuted. That must hurt. And then one of the guys was talking about, like, if we're talking about ridiculous finishes, can we talk about the people's elbow, please? And it only took someone to point it out. And I was like, of course that's ridiculous. Like you say, if you really wanted to believe it, I suppose you could. But, there were several wrestlers that would do a standing elbow drop that would be shaken off like a straight right fist to the face sort of thing, And one of the other guys, I'll credit him, Adam Nicholas on What Culture. He said one thing that he never understood watching wrestling was he said, okay, and the rock bottom's the perfect move to illustrate this. He said, you take the rock bottom, he's, okay, almost like swept his legs, lifted the guy up, and like slams him down from as high as he can and put him up. Okay, looks good enough, fine. But then you've seen in most matches, they'll go to the top rope and they'll suplex somebody from the top, and you think, well, the height and therefore the power when the guy comes down would be far in excess of any sort of straight slam or suplex. And yet there were far more people that had that as a finish, and no one ever finished a match with a top rope suplex. And it's just like, but it's surely the most damaging move is the one from the top.
I know, exactly. And like you say, the people's elbow, it's like the idea of him summoning or, charging up like with this basically a fucking dance move. And then swing to the right and then bounce to the rope on the left. And then, like, for me, my favorite two finishes were always the Stone Cold Stunner and the Tombstone, because there was something at least slightly different about them to any other move you'd see in the match.
Yeah, I always think that this Tombstone pile driver looks nasty. It looks like that would hurt.
And what was the one Triple H did as well? Where he'd
the pedigree.
Yeah, because that was sort of similar. He'd get the head between the legs, wouldn't he, and pull his arms up and then sort of drop on the head. So those three, at least they looked like finisher moves. But yeah, the rock bottom, I always kind of found the rock bottom pathetic because. I mean, it wasn't even grabbing him by the throat. Whose move was that? Was that Kane who did the one where he picked someone up by the choke slam? Was it?
Yeah. And the Undertaker.
Yeah,
and Big Show as well.
Oh, Big Show.
Well, it's the Big Show.
See, with that, I loved kind of there's some, maybe the bravado almost of doing that. Just picking someone up by the throat. But with the rock bottom, it was like, give me a hug, all right, and now I'll give you like a very minor slam to the ground. And yet, like you say, people twitching like salmon, flying up off the canvas after that move. And maybe there was a 13-year-old me that kind of woke up to that, and Dad, of course, was saying, well, you do realise the whole thing is contrived and staged. And back then I kind of thought, no, it can't all be. It's like they're doing certain things to make it more dramatic. But before too long, I kind of realised that I'm not in any way making a mockery of someone who would still love it all these years later, because it's the show business of it. It is a soap opera that you can really sort of identify and get behind. And I totally get it. I mean, I've not seen it lately. I'm going to guess, like most things in the world, that have been around for a while, it's just totally gone to shit. Am I correct? Or is it pretty good?
Unfortunately, the WWE have very much gone that way. But if you were ever interested to sort of dip your toe, then AEW is the place to be right now. AEW Wrestling. They're on, I believe it's ITV4 at 11 o'clock. Oh, did I? So I think I actually wrote down when it was. But either way, if you again, if I'm wrong there, if you search AEW Dynamite on Google and UK, it will, you can watch it for free. I set my recorder on Sky every week, and it's anyway, we those who know would definitely know. But yeah, I actually stopped watching the WWE and just listened to the podcasts telling me about what a crap show they'd done. Just far more entertaining than the actual show itself. I mean, Monday Night Raw these days is 3 hours long, and they often say, oh, it wasn't that bad this week. It actually made some sense. That's sort of how bad I mean, at the minute, for example,
and that's a pick of the year sort of thing,
Yeah, exactly. That's a good one. That is. We've got one character at the minute who's a supernatural character who resides within her own playground, dresses as a child, and has a supernatural doll which is intimidating other members of the women's roster and interfering in matches. How can a doll, supernatural or otherwise, interfere in a wrestling match? And why has it been allowed to get on the screen? I don't know. It's god awful. I mean, for God's sake, there was a pay-per-view last year where
But
somebody.
believing in magic was what we did back in, I don't know, circa 1998, 99, with, like we said, the Rock, charging up, summoning electricity or something like that.
Oh, I'm
in
sorry, mate.
some
I
ways,
can believe in the charisma of somebody, and then I could show you a picture of this doll, and I think you would cry with laughter. I mean, it's just so preposterous. Uh,
no, but
yes,
they both involve
last
the same
year,
fundamental thing, which is suspending our disbelief in that something magic
well, I
happens.
suppose so. I suppose so. But I mean, the thing that always comes to me is whenever somebody has said to me, "Oh, how can you still like wrestling? Oh, it's fake." And oh, okay, that's fine. I understand. It's not going to be for everyone. And again, I apologize if I mean, you're probably still not listening. If you're not into wrestling, this show is probably not going to be for you. And I also
What isn't
appreciate.
fake in the world of entertainment? Some
Well,
sport isn't
this
fake.
is what I was leading to. Is does my enjoyment of the Marvel films end because Captain America wasn't a real person who lived? Am I not able to sort of identify with Luke Skywalker's journey to, be the hero of the universe because he wasn't a real person, or that the events in that film weren't pre-planned out in a script beforehand?
Yeah, exactly. Who goes, oh, what's your favorite film? Oh, I only watch documentaries.
Yeah.
How many people like that are in the world? Or even like, oh, I only watch a film that's based on a true story. Well, that's still fake,
Yeah.
So I get you, totally get you.
I, as far as I'm concerned, with everything really, if you've got something that you yourself feel has enough merit that you can invest in, then that's all that matters, right? If you're invested, then it matters to you.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the way I
totally get why that happens in this world. My God, I was obsessed with things like SmackDown. I really was. And yeah, the likes of Stone Cold, the Rock, yeah, Big Show, Kane, Undertaker, and then yeah, there were people like Chris Jericho, and like even the outsider characters then kind of had something about them that resonated with me and that I could get behind, even if I saw them as a villain or someone I liked.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you what, Scott. I'll tell you what we're going to do now is I've got a little test for you.
Okay.
Now, this is a catchphrase test because at one point I was going to try and do an intro using as many catchphrases in a row as I possibly could whilst still making some sense. And then I thought, at least if we do it this way, you're guessing who the catchphrase is from, and it can be a sort of, it's a little bit of something for the audience and not just me enjoying rattling out sort of catchphrases that you might not even know. So right. I thought, right, okay, here we go. Nice and easy. First one, Scott Hughes. If you smell.
Well, it has to be. I think he only ever had one name, and it was The Rock.
It was The Rock, indeed.
And that's what he was cooking, of course.
That was a nice little. I don't actually know cricket in terms, but a nice down the middle sort of gentle bouncer, that one for you to smash out the park. Yeah, right, and then question number 2. Rest in peace.
Initial thoughts, no idea. Rest in peace. Is there anything to do with that? I don't know.
You'll kick yourself. It's the Undertaker.
Oh, okay. So
I thought the link to burials and coffin matches and things like that might have helped.
Yeah, well, my first thought was the Undertaker, but then I thought I don't remember him ever saying that, so I ruled it out because I was an Undertaker fan. Clearly, I wasn't. So okay, all right, 1 out of 2, whatever, none taken. Sure.
Yeah.
Get on with it.
Okay.
Get on with it.
Yeah, loving it. Have a nice day.
What's that? I'm thinking, someone that's got a sort of jovial, bubbly personality, but then how many really did have that?
Oh, I knew this would throw you.
I don't know. I'm going to say Vince McMahon because he sort of came out and did certain things.
No, if anything, if Vince, very much the Alan Sugar of his time, Vince's catchphrase was, "You're fired.
Okay.
Have a nice day is mankind.
Oh, as in Mick Foley and all his.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, and was Mankind the one that had the sock?
Yes, Mr. Socko. Yeah.
Mr. Sock. Okay. No, I can remember the image, but not so much all the stuff that went with it. So.
This is interesting stuff. Well, for me at least, I like it. Right, next catchphrase. It's true. It's damn true.
Oh, now that is familiar, but I'm I don't think I'm going to get a single one right here on. It's true. Damn. But again, that could be anyone saying that, really, for me.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Well, let's say Edge. The Edge.
Oh.
I don't know.
Well, there's a big distinction there because there's Edge the wrestler and there's the Edge of U2 fame. So
yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, either could have said it as far as I'm concerned. I don't know.
I'm going to the WWE. I am.
Yeah.
Right. It's Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle.
Okay, I remember. He was almost like Mr. America, wasn't he, Kurt Angle?
Oh yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Okay.
He won a gold medal with a broken freaking neck.
Damn true.
Right. Okay. This one. Well, I would say all of them. You probably either get it or you won't. Right. I'm the Ayatollah of rock and roller.
God. Again, I remember it, but just I can't picture a face saying it. Rock and roll. Well, no, it wouldn't be Stone Cold, but it's going to be someone who. Oh Christ, I don't know.
Think of someone who might have become a rock star since.
Help. Now I'm just trying to think of wrestlers, for Christ's sake. No, well, I've got to guess at something. The Ayatollah of Rock and Roller. I don't know.
Otherwise known as Y2J.
Oh, okay. Vaguely remember that name. Did he do something epic? A sort of like some move jumping off the corner? You know, like.
I can't give you the one move because it had his name in it, but he was often had lion salt as part of his repertoire.
One of the Hardy brothers did a jump off the top rung, didn't they? Like an epic.
Oh, the Swanton Bomb, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, good. I can remember something. Well,
yeah.
Can I get a point for that? So I'm at least.
Yeah, we give you points for style for Swanton
Bomb. Okay. All right. Yeah. Are there any more?
No, that I think you're either going to get that or you ain't. So you ain't.
Okay.
You give up?
No, sorry. We've got our lines crossed there. I think I missed a question there, or a catch.
Oh, were you saying that Jeff Hardy was the guy? Was that your guess for the Ayatollah of rock and roll?
Oh no! Oh, sorry. Yeah, we're still on that, aren't we? No. I just went completely off road, and I was like.
Oh, you just started naming finishes.
Well, I don't believe it was Jeff Hardy, but I don't.
No.
I'm going to have to just say Jeff Hardy.
Okay, that's not a bad guess. It's Chris Jericho.
Oh, okay. And he did what was that move called? He did like a sort of finisher.
Well, there's the Walls of Jericho, and then there's the Lion Salt.
I think the Walls of Jericho is the one I'm thinking of, where he sort of contorts the other guy's body until he has to sort of tap.
Yeah. It's essentially a Boston Crab, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm remembering things here, but just not the catchphrases. Okay, so what's that now? 1 out of 6.
No. Yeah. No, but it's interesting. It's interesting to see what seeped through because I know you're not exactly had the association with wrestling like I have. Right. Okay. So next one, and that's the bottom line. Why? 'Cause I goddamn said so.
Well, thankfully I can at least answer that one. It's Stephanie McMahon. No, that is Stone Cold, most definitely.
Ding 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 ding. We have a winner.
Sweet.
No, I'm really enjoying how seriously you're taking this. So I like it.
Yeah, I know. I love a quiz, and then equally I hate failing spectacularly at one. But at least I'm up to 2 now.
Yeah. Okay.
Any more?
So oh yeah. We got the full 10 for this.
That's my catchphrase. Any more?
Woo!
Oh, I don't know. It may well be one of the female wrestlers.
I'm sorry. I'm really not trying to laugh in your face, but no. One of the most decorated champions in all of wrestling history.
Oh right, and his super cool catchphrase was "Woo!"
Yep.
Okay. Oh fuck knows. Whoever it is,
Yeah.
I don't have much respect for them as a. Well, it's going to be a big name, isn't it? Oh man, I don't know. Let's.
It was the pioneer of the figure four leg lock. If that helps.
I don't know why, but this name came to mind. Chris Benoit.
No, good choice. Good choice. We're talking about Ric Flair.
The reason I said Chris Benoit is because I already had difficulty respecting him because of course he killed his wife and children.
Yes, yeah.
I'm not meaning to joke there because he genuinely did, of course. And
he did. So okay, Ric Flair's been and gone.
Ric Flair, remember the name, but just don't. I can't. Did he have white hair, like white kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of remember him.
An older guy. Well, certainly by the time he was in WWE, anyway. At least when we would have watched it. Right, okay, you're ready. Are you ready? Are you ready? Which is in itself a catchphrase, but that's not the catchphrase we're doing. The next catchphrase is, "What you gonna do, brother, when Hulkamania runs wild on you?"
Well, is it Hulk Hogan?
It is Hulk Hogan, yeah.
Okay.
Next catchphrase. "And if you're not down with that, we got 2 words for you. Suck it."
I don't know.
Oh, that's triggered something in there, hasn't it, though?
Oh, I really don't know.
D-Generation X. And finally, to put you out of your misery, "The best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be."
Fuck knows.
Is he an Oriental wrestler?
Yes. Yeah. I don't know.
You've got nothing?
No, I have got nothing, I'm afraid.
Okay, that was a little bit of a curveball, that one, but that is Bret the Hitman Hart.
Right. Okay.
Well, there we go.
I think I think you're commanding me with too much respect in terms of my knowledge of this whole thing.
Well, I thought it would be entertaining even if you knew absolutely nothing. So,
well, I'd consider it absolutely nothing. I mean, the what did I get there? 3?
Yeah, 3.5 because you got Swanton Bomb. Like, I give you half a point for that.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm quite happy with that because it's been so long since I've had anything to do with this stuff. And
the interesting thing is that you got Stone Cold and The Rock like straight off.
Yeah.
So that's clearly, as you said, they were the 2 big stars at the time. So that's clearly stayed with you.
Yeah, those 2, absolutely. But it's like EastEnders from the early 90s. Well, everyone probably remembers Dirty Ben or like, but like just everyone else there as
the Mitchell brothers.
Well, yeah, exactly, and like all the others were just peripheral characters to me that like I can't even picture their face. So what chance did I probably have with the catchphrase? But then it's funny because other people might remember the catchphrase more than the outfit and the name or the music. Whereas not for me. I'm the opposite. So I'm actually surprised I got anything that wasn't to do with Stone Cold and The Rock. So
well, I was going to say, and some of us might not have watched it at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I'll hold my head reasonably high there.
Yeah, well, this is not a judgment. This is, we're all friends here. So basically, what we've been talking about is referred to often as the Attitude Era, and this was sort of the pinnacle really of wrestling, or certainly as we know it. They were selling out, sold out white hot crowds across the nation. They could sort of basically do whatever they wanted. It was raunchy, it was rowdy, and it just sort of hit that sort of zeitgeist really, and when you've got Limp Bizkit coming in at the height of their fame to do the Undertaker's theme, and they performed him, to the ring for WrestleMania and stuff like that. It just seemed to hit a wave, and it all sort of tied in really nicely. And as I say, there was two competing wrestling companies at the time, WWE and WCW. And not to sort of linger on really longer than I need to, WCW had been sort of a more stringently wrestling based company, an older school sort of establishment, and they'd grown to prominence by picking up some of the older stars with established names from the WWE as they were being phased out for newer stars on lesser contracts, frankly. And they went back and forth, and there was a time where WCW looked like they were going to put the WWE out of business. And the WWE, or WWF at the time, they basically sort of had to make stars, and the two stars they made of all of them were Stone Cold and The Rock, and they were two irrepressible talents. And I think really that was the difference. If either of those two had jumped ship like so many did, then I think most people would think of WCW as synonymous with wrestling, and WWE would be sort of like a footnote in history. But as I say, there was WCW, which was a competing company, and they also had ECW, which was sort of like the extreme wrestling with the chairs and the tables and the. I mean, my God, I was watching with Glenn once. I bought him the best of ECW DVD, and we put it on, and they got a Taipei glass boxing match or something, and it was basically both wrestlers had their hands taped and dipped in super glue, and then they plunged their hands into a bucket of broken glass and then proceeded to have a boxing match against each other. I mean, both men, I mean, okay, they were doing the majority of blocking with their arms, but they were cut to shreds by the end of it. It was ridiculous.
Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, Sky One wouldn't agree to that at 10 a.m., would they?
And, no, they certainly wouldn't.
And also, I mean, that obviously, I'm not an expert on biology and things like that, but obviously, it doesn't need an expert to say that's dangerous, does it? You've only got to catch someone in the neck, and there's two carotid arteries there.
Oh yeah, and I mean, we, some of the stuff there. I mean, we were talking about Mick Foley earlier. But just to lightly glance upon some of his career in Japan, I mean, the Japanese really led the world in deathmatch for a while there. And, boards with small amounts of C4 and barbed wire rope matches and, exploding barbed wire boards and all this crazy stuff. It's madness. And for what a lovely, sweet man Mick Foley is, I can't believe he competed in some of these matches. But anyway, we're getting away from the topic, because what I really wanted to say was that having had a situation where the WWE had a direct competitor, which I think brought out the best in both sides, and it really pushed the WWE to sort of be the best they could be, as I say, to make their own new stars and to sort of try and capture that zeitgeist, to ride that wave, and the other companies just couldn't compete.
Well, this was like before really the dawn of proper internet, wasn't it? So at the same, simple, quick pulse surveys didn't really exist back then. So entrepreneurialism was really required, if you had a competitor like that, to set yourself apart and make yourself, and I suppose TV rights and all that stuff. So
yeah.
And
I mean, WCW, the WWE used to tape half their episodes, I think it was, or maybe it was all of them, and the ruthless guys at WCW paid each week for a guy to go and sit in the building where they were taping the WWE show, and then they'd give his report and read it out on air to tell the fans what was going to happen on the other side, to ruin their show and be like, well, seeing as you know what's going to happen over there, you might as well stay here and watch this. It's just like that's genius, evil, but that's genius.
Petty. That's petty.
Yeah. You're damn right, it's petty.
I mean, that's not what I was thinking of when I said the word entrepreneurialism.
No.
Like Oh, well, it probably worked. It probably worked,
Well, they went out of business, so it didn't work that well. But
Oh, well, there you go.
um,
Maybe that's what you call karmic justice outside of the
but
ring.
they apparently they won in the ratings for 86 weeks, which is become almost like a mythical stat now. So for 83 weeks rather, they won in the ratings. And on the first week that they lost, they were reading out the results, and it was that week that Mick Foley as Mankind was going to win the title, and he'd previously wrestled in WCW and had, been nowhere near the title, and they sort of went, "Oh, you might remember Cactus Jack who used to wrestle here. Yeah, well now he's Mick Foley and he's Mankind on WWF, and he's about to win the title. I mean, that's really going to put butts in seats." And
Well,
people,
in the ring, you've got this idea of honor and low blows and things like that. Well, I mean, that sort of thing from a business perspective is a low blow,
oh
and
yeah,
so for them to be out of business, like I said, that seems like sort of
but listen to this, man. Like
resorting to that sort of stuff,
the fans in their droves turned the channel because they all loved Mick Foley, and they
Oh,
were
that's
like,
cool then.
he's winning the title. Click. And that was the first night that the WWE beat the others in the ratings, and they dominated from pretty much then on out. And it put the other company out of business. And as you say, they were never the same. And it was that whole sort of, you know, that pettiness that, as you say, karmically came back to bite them in the end, I believe.
Yeah, even from a neutrality, a neutral's point of view, that tastes pretty sweet to me. So, yeah.
But let's not WWE. I've been a fan of, but I mean, at the same time, they're not necessarily a company that I look to defend with any great fervor. But what happened with the WWE was basically they had these two competitors, WCW and to a lesser extent ECW. They both went bankrupt and went out of business, and the WWE was sort of best placed to sort of buy their assets because they're a wrestling company as well, so they could buy the back catalog, buy the rights to the events they'd put on, so they could put out DVDs and stuff like that. And they were just like, right, okay. And naturally enough, one of the assets that came with these companies were the wrestlers, and so they absorbed sort of the top talent out of these companies into their roster. And okay, you had Stone Cold had broken his neck, unfortunately, some years before, and he'd managed to soldier on for all these years. And basically, it had come to pass that he was almost forcibly retired. He would go on to be sort of like general manager and things like that. But unfortunately, Austin was fairly neutered after the Attitude Era had really come to pass. And The Rock, of course, had gone off mainly to be in Hollywood. So those two sort of key talents, I think, had both sort of realized that they'd achieved a level of fame that didn't necessarily, live and die with wrestling, and had gone on to their various endeavors. And it didn't start to hurt things initially, but because you had these other places where people could go, and if things weren't working with one company, they could go to the other, and perhaps they'd have a different take, or they'd need a new sort of character, or suggest a different type of way to go with what you were going to do in the ring. And it began to sort of stifle the industry. And before long, really, the WWE became little more than the main event, whereas beforehand, I mean, I think we've spoken before about, in the good old days, you could give a monkeys about pretty much the majority of everything that was on the show. I mean, I always loved Too Cool with Scotty 2 Hotty and Grandmaster Sexay and Rikishi and Scotty 2 Hotty doing the worm.
That's stuff I can remember now you say it. Yeah.
Yeah. And they all like bringing down the lights and putting the shades on if they won and doing a little dance at the end.
Was Rikishi the big dude, with almost a Hawaiian, like sort of
Polynesian
Polynesian vibe?
Samoan.
Yeah, that's it. And then I'll probably mix two things up here, but did he not have a cohort that went, indeed?
Oh no, that's Funaki. Yeah, now there was I believe a Japanese tag team, Kai and Taka Michinoku, and yeah, they started a gimmick there where the one would have like a massive sort of, I think they had to have
Like a monologue in Japanese with subtitles or something.
no, I was going to say, I think they had to have an interpreter there, and they were, it was just sort of like, oh, he says this, and we're going to go out there and we're going to win, and da, da, da. And they go, what do you think, Funaki? And they just pass in the mic and goes, indeed.
Yeah, I mean, like again, with 2 decades going by, you can see how I've sort of fused the two in my subconscious.
Oh, sure.
Over the years. But yes, yeah. Anyway, sorry, let's carry on. I mean, I suppose I mean, you talk about yeah. So, The Rock moving to Hollywood. Well, come on, that's transferable skills. Let's face it. So I can understand why that happened. Stone Cold again. I can understand why that happened, and of course, he had a crippling knee injury, didn't he, that plagued his career.
Well, I say it was more his neck than anything, but yes, he certainly did have bad knees as well.
And so, I like the fact that they didn't try and just whip up, in a puff of smoke out of nowhere, these two new massive, juggernaut kingpin characters. They focused on trying to cultivate flesh out other characters and take it from there in a slightly more natural way.
Well, you see, part of the problem was during the Attitude Era, they were struggling for sponsors because there was some crazy stuff that was going on, and a lot of sponsors, the mainstream sponsors, they wanted no part of it. And by about 2002, they'd sort of skimmed off the creme de la creme of the previous companies, incorporated them into their ranks, and they could go forward with two fairly stacked rosters on Raw and SmackDown. But because they weren't selling like gangbusters like they were with Stone Cold and The Rock, they sort of looked to the advertising to sort of bump up their money, and it meant that they had to roll back some of this raunchy content because there was stuff that certain people, they just would not abide, and so it became almost evident that things just became toned down. And unfortunately, it was that freedom of expression that allowed the likes of The Rock and Stone Cold to really truly be the best they could be, because to a great extent there was no holds barred. And I think that's why you've just not seen a star on their level since, because creeping in more and more and more, instead of you being able to go in there and say, we're going to have this sort of match and I want to do this sort of move, and I've got an idea for this bit, or I've got an idea for an end. You've got an agent assigned to your match. You have sort of got to run everything past them. If you've got a promo, 9 times out of 10, especially the last sort of 10 years or so, you are given a script which you've got to learn, and you have very little input. And if you want to sort of change anything, you've got to wait in line to see Vince in his office. And obviously, being the leader of a multinational company, he might not be available for 3 or 4 hours. So, it's a frustrating process.
Well, I'd love to know the viewing figures year on year. With let's just sort of keep to WWF and then WWE. From about 98 to today. I would love to know what the viewing figures are. I would be highly surprised if they've been published.
Well, at present, I know, for example, if they manage to get 2 million watches, they're absolutely, that they've done a really good week. And back in the midst of Stone Cold's reign, I think you could pull in 8 to 10 million listeners, watchers, quite happy. Quite happily.
Also, you got these pay-per-view events, which I know inflation and all that, but I would imagine have been hiked exponentially, regardless of inflation. So a Sky Sports pay-per-view nowadays would probably cost, even with inflation adjusted, at least half as much again as what they cost back in the day. When,
no, ironically, it's about the same. I would say it's about $14.99 a pop.
Oh, okay. Well,
that was pretty much the way it was, but they sell considerably less these days. So yeah, basically where I wanted to go was, they were really they were spoilt for choice. They'd got so much talent on their books. They didn't really need to develop anybody. They were sort of watering down some of this, incredibly edgy content that they had. And unfortunately, what it meant was that they had so many established guys on their rosters through one thing and another that they didn't really need to make any stars, and they didn't, they didn't have, you couldn't really do Stone Cold anymore because you just couldn't have that sort of character and comply with the sort of sponsors that they were having at the time. And so it became a thing where WWE considered themselves almost like the biggest thing, that you should turn up to see the WWE event regardless of the wrestlers because they were the watermark of quality. And I think that's really proved the massivest downturn in their fortunes, because of course it's the talent. Of course it's the talent that people are showing up. People didn't go in to see the WWE because that was the home of Stone Cold and The Rock. They went to see The Rock and Stone Cold because they were on, that was why they went, not because of the company. And ever since, it's been a dwindling situation where, viewing figures and indeed sort of quality of programming has just sort of spiraled gradually year on year, to the point now where, as I say, I'm still a wrestling fan, but the WWE is practically unwatchable, really, for anyone with a brain. It's quite incredible. I mean, one thing I was going to point out to you earlier, last year, they had a pay-per-view where in the event, a guy called Seth Rollins faced Rey Mysterio Jr. And it was an eye for an eye match where the match was only to end when the other extracted one of the other's eyeballs.
Right.
And Rey Mysterio, quote unquote, you can't see, it's a podcast, so you can't see me doing the air quotes, but he had his eyeball removed live on pay-per-view, and essentially someone put jam on a ping pong ball and sort of like slipped it into his mask, and he just sort of like pops it out as he's apparently supposed to have like had his head smashed into the corner of the ring steps. And Seth Rollins goes up the ramp like throwing up because he's so disgusted at what he's seen. And it's like, Rey Mysterio is now back to wrestling, and he's, very clearly still got two eyes. And they were just, it came out of his head, but the optical nerve still remained. So they could reattach it. It was just bruised.
Whereas someone did actually have their eye pop out accidentally in wrestling. I don't think it was a particularly well-known person. I'm not sure it was in one of the, bigger sort of selling or known franchises, but definitely someone did have their eye come out, and they had to kind of hold it in. And you do get genuine injuries, of course, that happen in these things. I've seen things like bicep tears, like where it's actually the biceps popped out, or Mick Foley dropped from the top of a cage and broke his ankle.
Oof, yeah.
Things like that do happen. In fact, Vince McMahon once tried to run into the ring and tore both of his quads.
Yeah.
And had to basically sit on the floor with a microphone. You do get genuine injuries.
Oh yeah.
But whilst we're talking about Vince McMahon, right, and how perhaps the popularity of this is like you say, wilted spectacularly down the years, I think it's because, much like pop music, things just change with generations. It devolves, really. And if you've got the same man in charge who is, knows his craft in a certain area, but is going to be very much a dinosaur in others, then, of course, things are going to stagnate, and it's just not fully aligned with what people of the same age nowadays particularly would want to tune in for or kind of get behind. So, I kind of get it,
Right, now I don't want to ramble on too long, but basically I just have to talk about AEW because, as I say, I started not watching the shows of WWE anymore. I was on What Culture podcasts, and they had been talking about, there was a group of guys in Japan, and they were, either Canadian or American, and they were looking to put together their own sort of wrestling company. And one of the people involved, their backer, as it were, was Tony Khan. And I had not really put two and two together, but the Khan family, they not only own the Jacksonville Jaguars, they also own Fulham FC. Now,
Oh, okay.
I remember at the time not being very happy with the Khan family because they tried to buy the Wembley Stadium for Fulham, if you remember, and I thought that was incredibly bloody cheeky. But I can see why they would make the offer. If you don't ask, you don't get. Ultimately, at the end of
Yeah.
the day. But that stadium, we finally had got a home for English football that we could be proud of. And, it featured in films, and it had been, a real London landmark as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, you're far more London savvy than I am, but that's how I feel about it. And for them to sort of sneak in, it was a project that had gone over budget, and it was public funded by so many million, and for them to sort of sneak in and go, wow, we'll keep all the old stuff about England in there if you like, but we'll make it Fulham's ground, thanks very much. But yeah, I started hearing about this company, AEW, and the guys in What Culture were really excited, and they were just like, right, okay. They've got Cody Rhodes, and Cody Rhodes had been someone I'd known from the WWE, son of the legendary oh Jesus Christ, how a name just deserts you when you really need it. Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, who was a legendary
Right.
wrestler back in the day. And Cody had been given a series of ridiculous gimmicks and had always thrown himself in two-footed. And I always admired him, always thought he was a good wrestler, and always, admired that even when he was given ridiculous sort of, painting his face with a golden star and coming out in like golden spandex and stuff, it's just like, oh my God. But he tried his best to get everything they gave him over. And I was like, this guy's a professional. I really admire that. And there was a tag team called the Young Bucks, who again I hadn't really seen a lot of. They're mainly sort of the independents in America and in New Japan in Japan, which is the next big sort of wrestling hub really. And Kenny Omega, who I'd heard was essentially almost like the best pure athlete in wrestling, and that his nickname was the Best Bout Machine. He was one of the prominent wrestling reporters. Dave Meltzer had got a 5-star system, and he had awarded a Kenny Omega match 7 stars. So if you've broke the system by 2 full stars, you've got to be pretty good. And I'd never seen much of him either, and I was just like, oh wow, I'd heard rumblings about these guys sort of on the underground almost. I was just like, oh wow, that they're going to start up a new company. And then I'd heard that they got the Khan family backing them with their billions, and it was revealed to me that really, compared to Vince McMahon, the Khan family have got billions, and Vince is still very much sort of millionaire territory. And they were like, really, if they wanted to, they could financially outmuscle Vince. I was just like, oh sugar, this could be interesting. And then little pieces started falling into place. They'd signed up Chris Jericho, and I was like, oh okay, that's really interesting. Say what you like about Jericho, but he's always been a shrewd businessman. And then the great legendary tag team commentary team from the Attitude Era, Jerry the King Lawler and JR. Well, they'd got JR to come in to do commentary, and even though JR is obviously quite an old man now, he's still the voice of generation as far as I'm concerned. I was just like, oh shit, they got JR. This is great. And I, knew for a fact that there would be like a raft of young and up and coming talent that I'd never heard of before, and I became sort of, I was scouring the internet, who was going to sign next, and who are they looking at, and who else have they got, and trying to find matches on obscure wrestlers to see, like, oh, okay, that and that guy. The first time I laid eyes on Luchasaurus, for example, I mean, like a 6-foot+ guy who wrestles in a dinosaur mask. I don't need more than that, really, but I got more. Brilliant. And I have to say, the reason I feel the need to speak at such length about AEW is it took me right back it took me right back to those heady days when I was so much a younger man, and that excitement returned, I have to say. And it's not flawless, there's nothing that's going to be perfect right off the bat, but I implore any of you, if you're looking to give something a try that perhaps might be a little bit out of your wheelhouse, then I implore you to tune in to AEW Dynamite, and I think you will be entertained far more than you aren't,
I'll give
and
that a whirl.
especially compared to what they're competing against, they are head and shoulders above everything else on the market. And they especially the pay-per-views, they really pride themselves on being what they call sort of like a wrestling buffet. So especially when they started out, I mean, it was incredible. You had what they call the Joshi wrestlers, which is sort of like women from Japan, and then you'd have a big battle royale, and then you'd have a crazy sort of a tag team match where I mean, my God, if you want to, one of the craziest spots I think I've ever seen, you want to type in Canadian Destroyer off a ladder, and a Canadian Destroyer is like a flipping pile driver, and there's a guy who stood on basically at the top of a ladder, and a guy jumps, vaults over him, the other guy completely, grabs hold of his waist as he pulls him back first off the ladder, as he lands with the point of his head smack in the middle of the table, and they go through the table. And how they didn't break his neck, I'll never know. But it's one of the most spectacular things I've ever seen. My God, I was literally like leaping around my room, just like, oh my God, oh my God. Now, a lot of you may never get to that point, but I just think, hey, why not give it a try?
Yeah, if it does anything to bring back how I felt in the 90s or late 90s, early noughties, watching SmackDown and the like, then it's worth checking out from me or for me. So, yeah.
Right. Okay. So I've got that out. That's what I wanted to say.
No, that's really cool. I'm glad you did, and I'm glad that something out there has brought it back for you, how it was before. That's awesome. That's awesome.
And it's really interesting storylines. Not all of it, as I say, is going to resonate with everybody, but there's one guy who's an alcoholic cowboy, and he sort of was involved in the first ever title match that they ever had.
Is that
and
not
lost.
Slightly what Stone Cold Steve Austin was, or at least maybe
two
facets to Stone Cold's?
You might think so on the outside, but they couldn't be much further apart, really.
Okay.
Because he's since gone on a 2-year sort of self-doubting, self-loathing, and sort of pushing his friends away, and almost like self-destructing, to come down to a point to find a group that were like willing to give him a second chance and be like, we believe in you. And he's finally, after 2 years, has built himself back up to the point where he's like, no, actually, do you know what? Yeah, I do believe in myself, and these guys are my friends, and we're going to do it. And I'm doing 2 years of storyline, very, very poor justice. But as we're just reaching towards the culmination of that storyline, or at least I think so, that whole sort of journey of, like I say, him feeling abandoned by his friends, pushing everyone away, and feeling like a loner, and feeling like he didn't deserve friendship. It's the sort of territory that's not really been covered in wrestling TV for years and years. And it's that sort of character depth that I can attach to. It's that sort of long-term storytelling that makes it worth tuning in.
Yeah.
But yeah, also, before I forget, I would be absolutely remiss to say how fucking excited I am that apparently both CM Punk, who was one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, one of the more new guys, and Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson, depending on which way you want to look at him, they were both apparently signed with AEW, and I'm speechless. Do you know what I mean? I know this probably means nothing to you, Scott, and probably a lot of you at home, but these two guys are, the closest the WWE had to a, real big mainstream stars, and they sort of ruined them both, or sort of, pissed them both off to the point that CM Punk was so pissed off with the WWE that he left wrestling altogether for about 7 years, and this is the first time that he sort of deemed a company worthy of sort of coming back for. And I watch this space is all I can say. Genuinely fucking excited, like you wouldn't believe. But now, you've all you've all had your vegetables and listened to me, talk about all this wrestling bollocks. And really, what we want is a bit of a laugh, innit? It's a bit of a laugh. We all like a bit of a laugh, don't we, Scott? We like a laugh. Wow. I've developed this quiz. And
before you do, I really need the toilet, and then I can concentrate wholeheartedly on everything. Is that all right?
Okay, let's do it.
Right. Yeah, 2 seconds. Cheers. Chip, chip, chow. All right, let's get quizzical, baby.
Wow. Just to steal a bit from Adam Wilborn, right here is a bloody good quiz. Now, I've put in the answers to all these questions have all happened. All of them. Everything that I'm talking about has happened at some point in some promotion, and the only thing is to point out how ridiculous wrestling can be at times, but also it's the whole point is what happened, the answer of that specific question. That's what makes it a quiz, right? Well, I think you understand, don't you, Scott?
Yes, I'm not in terms of what you just said there. I'm game.
So options A, B, and C is what I've done. A, B, and C all happened.
But obviously one of them is correct and applicable to the question.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Question number 1. The Big Boss Man infamously gatecrashed the Big Show's father's funeral. What action did he do to provoke the Big Show? Was it A, steal the coffin, towing it away with his police car? Was it B, proclaim loudly that his father had passed away after too much rigorous lovemaking with his younger wife? Was it C, show a video of him apparently molesting the corpse in its coffin? Now, all of those things happened. All of them.
What do you mean?
But it wasn't. They all happened in wrestling. It's just not all of them were performed by the Big Boss Man.
Right. Okay. My initial thought to B, it was a sort of cocky, callous suggestion that he was punching above his weight with regards to the age gap between him and his wife, and it was that caused his demise. I'm going to go with B.
Okay, B. The answer is A. He stole the coffin, towing it away with his police car.
Okay.
With Big Show riding on the back. Oh man, what an image!
Stuff. It is an image. Isn't it?
Question 2. The Undertaker's manager Paul Bearer had been involved in a situation with the Dudley Boys where they had captured him, and his fate was to be decided in a handicap match versus the Undertaker. But what was the stipulation? Was it A, a casket match needing both of the Dudleys to be in the casket when the lid was closed? B, Undertaker losing would result in Paul Bearer being encased in concrete? Or C, Paul Bearer was held captive in a shark cage that hung over the ring during the bout?
I'm going to go down the middle again. B. I believe the threat of concrete was involved, Lars.
Yes! And Undertaker, in a shocking move, having won the match and able to liberate his manager, pulled the chain and filled in the case that he was in with the concrete anyway.
Well, he doesn't want to tune in for that. Come on.
I know. What little scamp. Right, question 3. Kane ended up getting Lita pregnant. But what resulted from this pregnancy? Was it A, now remember, all of this happened at some point?
Yeah.
Was it A, she gave birth to a hand? Yeah. B, a live sex celebration in the ring, live on Monday Night Raw? Or was it C, she was accidentally bumped into by an opponent of Kane, causing a miscarriage? Despite the claims of his innocence, the opponent later punted a baby doll into the crowd.
Well, Kane had something to do with the hands, didn't he? The glove or something like that. Or was it more to do with the mask on his face? And I'm getting them confused. I mean, to be honest, I'm feeling like the whole miscarriage narrative and then punting a doll into the crowd would just make for... I mean, clearly it happened somewhere in the show. I'm going to say that was what happened here. Look.
Yes, good lad. Yeah, she was accidentally bumped into by an opponent of Kane who caused the miscarriage, and that led to the opponent taking up the catchphrase of "It's not my fault" before kicking a doll into the audience, which was just special.
Yeah, I mean, that's to declare it's not your fault, presumably not for sympathy, given that you're about to suggest that you're punting a baby into the crowd. It's an interesting one, that, isn't it? Let's face it. And of course, neither Loz or I are laughing at the notion of miscarriage. Let's make that abundantly clear.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
And also, that WWE once aired an episode where a woman gave birth to a hand. That happened. Just keep that in mind. Question number 4. Vince McMahon and Donald Trump once clashed at WrestleMania, with both men nominating a wrestler to fight on their behalf. But what was at stake? Was it A, $1 million? Was it B, the loser would be shaved bald? Or was it C, the loser would have to kiss the winner's feet?
When we say loser, do we mean the loser wrestling-wise, or do we mean the loser out of McMahon and Trump?
Well, because they were both, like, you know, not exactly physical. Well, I mean, Vince is pretty much a physical specimen. They weren't going to fight each other, so whoever's nominated wrestler lost. That's the loser.
So it's the loser of the bet. Well, you know, one of the two is bald, quite famously. Would love to have the world believe that he isn't. When we're talking Trump, I don't believe $1 million would be. It could be. So it's right for me. I'll omit that one for now.
I think you should go with your instincts.
Well, okay. The whole kissing feet thing, I don't think is. All right, it's going to be okay. Let's go with. I can't remember if it was A, B, or C. I think it might have been B. Shaved bald. We're going with bald.
Yes, good lad. Yeah, Vince McMahon was his chosen wrestler was defeated, and he was shaved bald on pay-per-view.
Oh, the fucking irony of that, Vickers. Well, yeah.
He then went on to win the ECW title in a bandana, which I thought was something special.
I like that. Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
Oh, I like that.
And as if that really matters, as if being bold, does that even matter? This is where the bravado and the well, it's vanity comes into it, isn't it? Oh goodness me! I mean,
this is.
If I was, I mean, look, I've got a minor sunroof opening up there. I'm quite happy to admit it to all of you. And you know, in the future, hey, you know, if I want to dye my hair or something, I might do it. But the thing is, I wouldn't pretend that I hadn't. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just because that's pathetic. Anyway, I'm sorry, I've deviated.
Question number 5. In a feud with Booker T, what outlandish thing did Kurt Angle attempt to do to get to his opponent? Was it A, stalked his wife and claimed he wanted to have bestiality sex with her?
I can't imagine Kurt Angle doing that, but someone's done it somewhere. Okay.
Was it B, use a crane to demolish his tour bus, which exploded instantly? Or was it C, kidnapped his daughter and attempted to, bracket, crucify her?
Well,
Yeah,
my
that's
memory of
right.
Kurt Angle is that he was kind of like America, and he was more about
Mhm.
virtue and sort of, wouldn't resort to that type of thing. But I don't know, because he could have easily had his character just, callously just changed in a cavalier manner to come out with something like that down the line, and I don't know. Again, my instinct is to go down the middle and say B with the crane, but that's the one I think is the most likely of the three. But then I don't know, something's drawing me to C. As ridiculous as much as it doesn't seem to chime with the character of Kurt Angle that I remember. My first instinct was B because it's the most likely, I feel, but I'm going to say C.
I'd just like to remind you again, every answer has happened at least once, right?
Yeah.
And the answer, question 5, is A.
Oh
He stalked his wife and claimed he wanted to have bestiality sex with her. He has since gone on to say that this was one of the most regrettable portions of his career. And there we have it.
I did markedly better in that one. I think I got 2 or 3, didn't I?
I put you. Yeah, I think it was 3 out of 5. Yeah.
All right, that's okay. That's cool. Even though some of them were just not even intuition, really. Just, but no, that's cool. That's cool. I thoroughly enjoyed that, Loz. Thank you. I love a good quiz.
Yeah.
And indeed a bad one. I and that was a good one. But I love a quiz, is what I'm saying. And so thank you for that. I've got one for you coming up in. Well, here's the thing. Now, we're going to record this one next, but this won't necessarily be the next one in the series. I don't want to move away from wrestling whilst we're still in the wrestling episode, because I'm not like, we got your shit out of the way, Loz. Right, let's, that is
onto the main event.
Yeah, that is not what I'm getting at, right? I'm just saying that I've thoroughly enjoyed also coming up with a quiz for you recently. And so I'm looking forward to getting to that down the line. But thank you for that. So, 3 out of 5, I'll take that. And I really enjoyed listening to you talking about wrestling, and I apologize if what I've chipped in with hasn't been born out of sort of a mutual love for wrestling. And also,
no, I think you've done actually, no disrespect to you, but far better than I expected. Especially your initial contributions really made some valid points that I was just like, oh yes, he's really expressed that very well. So no, I've really enjoyed it myself, and thank you all for putting up with it.
Yeah, and like I say, I said this to you the other day when we were WhatsApping, I was like, I could have gone off and done a little bit of more research into this, so I was better equipped to come in armed with some, not so much information, but just at least jog my memory, But I thought, no, I won't.
Yeah.
And so that's what's happened here. So I do hope you've enjoyed it, everyone, and I hope you've enjoyed it, Lars. Thank you. I thoroughly have done.
Yes, and I hope if nothing else, it might have made a few people in the audience, and indeed yourself, Hughes, a little bit more curious about something they might not have thought to give a try, especially in this modern era. And who knows, you might just find something you find yourself liking, and if not, what have you really ventured? Hey.
Yeah, so I quite, and I will. I'll try and seek something out. It might. I just have to be on YouTube, Anyway, jib jamb and all that, and I'll see you on the flip side, but
Indeed, bish bash bosh.
Quite. All right. Ta-da.
Toodle pip.